Welcome plant nerds, welcome bird nerds. I'm Grant. This is Habitat Gardening with me for the Bird Emergency. I think you can probably tell I'm not focused properly and I can't find the reason. First day, got the new camera going, seemed to work fine on the earlier stream, but not now. Anyway, thanks for joining me. It's a grey day outside, but for those of you who are not aware, I'm a bird nerd, but I'm also a plant nerd. I am a horticulturist. I did go through Burnley. I did do parks and gardens maintenance. I have worked in nurseries, production nurseries, retail nurseries. I've sold a whole bunch of products that are good and bad for gardens, for animals, for all sorts of creatures. I've been an irrigation designer, been been an expert on turf. Oh my goodness. So today I've got the horticulture hat on. It's nice of you to be here. I want to just let you know that it's nice to know where you're from if you're joining us live. Well, I hope you're joining us live. This show doesn't go into the podcast feed. It's only an opportunity to talk birds, gardens, lizards, insects, plant selection, design tips, hints in the live format. And you can, of course, catch it on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch if you're not with us live. It's a great day outside, and it's referendum day in Australia, and it's election day in New Zealand. So hopefully you can get some tips here, and it's short and sweet today. I hope you'll get lots of questions, that you will give me lots of questions so that we can talk about something other than berries and fruit-eating plants, fruit-eating animals. What I wanted today is just give you a couple of tips that you can take with you if you are selecting plants or looking to get some cuttings or something, about the things you need to consider, or that I think you need to consider when you're looking at a plant to add to your garden that has berries or fruits. Let's not get too technical, drupes, or before you buy them and before you put them in the garden. There will be a tips sheet that will be available on Monday. It will be available through, now last week's one is not available yet because the testing hasn't worked right, but it will be either available through Patreon or through Substack as a download. I'm trying to move things off the website and put them into things where I have to do less work. So thebirdemergency.com/live will have those repositories, and I'll promote them on the socials on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and for the time being, X/Twitter, and on my current favourite, which is TikTok. Okay, let's get right to it. Plants that bear fruit come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I'm not going to give you a list of species now. I will tell you a couple of useful genera to look out for if you're at the nursery. But there's a couple of guiding principles that I think you need to know, or that you need to consider when you're looking at placing plants in your garden when they are going in there with the purpose of bringing in wildlife and my special interest, birds. But that rarely do I see any of this information on labels, and certainly I don't think your local nursery staff are thinking about it initially. Now, the first thing is not will it attract wildlife. The first thing to consider is it toxic? Is it toxic to people? Is it toxic to pets? Or is it toxic to other animals? And some are. So it's best to avoid them. You can extend that out to plants that have seeds that we would generally think of as a plant that bears seeds. So it may have a fleshy or softer outer skin as well, and of course flowers, but let's just stick to the fruiting bodies. I'll put a list of a couple that you need to definitely avoid, but that's the first thing. Are the berries toxic? Second thing, are they an environmental weed, or do they have the potential to be an environmental weed? And you need to check, are they on a noxious or declared pest list, either in your state or in your municipality? Cotoneaster is one plant that is a real problem. Lantana in certain parts of the country, and I'm speaking from an Australian perspective here, ligustrum, or the camphor laurel, privet. There's a stack of them which some birds really love, but there's no way in a modern garden they should be being used. So, and a responsible nursery is probably not selling them, but a lot of people are cultivating things from their backyard or going to fetes or doing garage sales. I noticed some ligustrum around here the other day when I walked past a garage sale, and I walked up and had a look. They had a lot of plants. Most of them were just things like kalanchoes, other succulents, jade plants. But there were ligustrum. One of the worst weeds, certainly in Melbourne and in the eastern states of Australia. Terrible plant. So don't use them. The next thing I would say is, does the berry stain? And this is something that comes to the front of my mind because I lived in Brisbane for a while, and when we forgot to bring our washing in overnight, which was frequent, in the morning you would you would go out and your sheets, or your white t-shirts, pink wind cheaters, would be stained from the fruit bats having defecated, or birds defecating flying above, and staining your clothes or your other laundry that you just can't get rid of. Now, it seems not like a big issue, but if you have a very popular plant with your local wildlife, especially fruit bats, but other birds, lorikeets even, and they're pooping on not only your washing, things like your outdoor furniture that may have cloth backs or seats. A lot of plastic nowadays will also stain if you get berries dropped, defecated onto them. It's just best if you're putting something in the garden, you just don't have that, or you position them in a place where maybe the fruit bats are less likely to come in. It's just a design choice, but it's something you need to be aware of. Maybe you just do some research on what will remove those kind of stains, but just something to consider. The other thing you need to be aware of is where berries will drop and whether they stain. And if they're on over a path, if you've spent a lot of money on having your concrete finished in a particular colour or patination, or you're using tiles that are not completely sealed, and you're getting purple or red blotches on them, and people are then walking on them, or your dogs are running over and crushing them, and you're getting staining. Not good. So that's a combination of placement, but also um, often berries that are not planted directly overhead, the fruits still end up on a hard surface. Um, Also on decking, things like that, they get stuck in people's shoes. You walk them up. So just be mindful. Just be mindful of those issues. And sometimes the cleaning agents are so toxic that it's just best not to even use them. I'll just stop here for a minute. Hello Twitch. Hello YouTube. Just tell me where you are from, so that I can maybe scope the discussion a bit to where you are from. Also, let me know. It's referendum day in Australia. Have you already done your voting, or are you heading out to do that shortly? Now, I've kind of given some warnings or some things to be mindful of when it comes to introducing fruits, berries, drupes to your garden. And I hope I haven't scared you off straight away with that. But there's just some of the things to bear in mind. The weed potential is one of the greatest issues. But sometimes you might want to weigh the weed potential in against the potential benefit of planting something or maintaining in your garden something which could have weed potential. And an example of that is hawthorns, and for a bird like the gang cockatoo, which lost so much of its habitat in the fires over the last few years, that any any food source is a good food source at the moment. And of course, it takes a long time for trees to mature and recover, for their food sources to recover. I did notice some footage of gangs feeding on immature fruits of decorative cypress. I see the corellas, the long-billed corellas and the little corellas around my area doing the same thing. And in a lean year, and in a landscape where mature plants are just disappearing at an accelerating rate, maybe you don't want to let you don't need to aim for perfect if it means putting some food trees or food plants in the landscape. To digress a little bit, there was a really large lily-pilly, Acmena smithii, which was really popular with lorikeets, cockatoos here, but also the blackbirds, miners. Of course, we don't want to be encouraging them so much, but it was a major food source for the wildlife in the area. And that house with that tree was sold, and the first thing they did was take out all of the vegetation, and it was a large tree. It was bearing I couldn't even estimate, but kilograms and kilograms of fruit over a long period of time, and it's gone. So those birds have to find an alternate food source, or they have to leave. If they leave, do they survive? We don't know. Anyway, so that's just life in the suburbs. So in my street, if I was going to try and replace that, I would be looking at a fantastic genus of plants that's so adaptable, so many sizes available, and that is a syzygium, also marketed just as lily pillies. And if you're further north, warmer climes, figs, so many figs, ficus are available. But you don't need to go to big trees to provide berries. In my part of the country, again, and over so many parts of the country, you can put in a tufting plant, a grass-like plant, the Dianella, that has berries after their blue and yellow flowers, a lovely blue, purpley blue berry. There's some really elegant climbers, Billardieri. They have lovely little berries. I don't want to go through a whole range of specific plants because while we're doing a front-facing talking head, they don't make much sense. Just to explain why I haven't produced visuals for all of these, just simply because unless you're going to keep going back and unless you're actively taking notes, you're going to go back and re-watch, I don't think there's much utility in that. So it's better I put the time into producing that downloadable file for you with a list and give some thought to similar species that I can rattle off some for Melbourne and Sydney, but they'll be different in Brisbane, Darwin, Perth. We need some that maybe need to be more cold tolerant for Hobart. So I'll give you some examples for each one. And when I'm preparing these lists, I have a look at what's available in the nursery trade as best I can, giving a couple of hours to it rather than weeks to it as I rattle these off. So the idea is to try and give you a bit more utility, a bit more usefulness when I do produce those. And again, they will be available on Patreon and Substack. They won't be things you have to pay for, so don't worry about that. The idea is just to let me, you will have to trade your email address for that, and when you do that, that means I can easily update you with what's coming up. Even though this Saturday morning is going to be a regular, this will probably be just short and sweet each week with a broad theme, but guests and speaking to authors and designers, architects, they're not all. Saturday morning is a hard time, so those things will crop up at different times over the week, and I'd like to be able to easily let you know when they're on, and that's the purpose of doing that. I am playing around with platforms, Patreon, Substack, Buy Me a Coffee. I'm just trying to take off some of the work or the time that's taken to keep the website up to date while I'm trying to get many different voices onto the show and into the podcast or just onto the live stream. So bear with me with that. That's the reason for it, the thinking behind it. Now, do you have a question, a thought, or an idea of some topics that you would like me to cover coming up? Specifically, you have anything about design principles and berries, or do you have a target species that you're looking to attract? And I'll give you some ideas if I can. I'll give you an idea of some of the things that are on the whiteboard for us to talk about in the next little while. Irrigation is one. I'm going to cover really basic principles of irrigation, and then extending on from that, talking about the different types of irrigation, some design principles in irrigation for a garden with sustainability in mind, cost in mind. We'll tackle the topic of lawns and grasses. It's hard to justify having a lawn, but depending on your time of life, and there's things like if you're putting a lot of money into property and you want to be able to resell it, if you have a medium term or short term plan to move after you've purchased, and then you want to sell and move on to something else, often a selling feature is the lawn, just to sell the thing, even if people are not going to use a lawn in the long term. So that's another topic we will talk about. I know a lot about lawn and maintaining it, and how much resources it needs to keep it looking good. So I'll talk about some things like that. I'm going to talk about small spaces. We're going to talk about using containers. That's something that crops up all of the time. So there's an idea. So I'm throwing it open to you now. Let's see. Hello Facebook. We've got back on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. Fantastic. So there was just a very brief idea of the things to think about when you go to your nursery and are looking for plants to introduce fruits, berries into the garden. Of course, you may already have fruits and berries in your garden in the form of cherries, plums, apricots, any large fruit. You may have locusts, you may have figs. There's always an issue when it comes to netting and protecting those fruits if the reason for having them is to harvest them for your own use. Generally, I would say please don't use netting, but if you must, make sure it's as bird safe, as wildlife safe as it can possibly be. But I think we're almost of the view that you cannot be sure that you are not going to harm birds by using netting, or you're not going to harm bats. So my principle would be plant extra so that the wildlife get enough and you get enough. It's a difficult one because if you're planting fruits just because you want the fruit, I think you just have to share. I don't think there's a way other than really exclusionary structures like wire netting and trellises, and making sure birds and other animals can't get in from the bottom as well as the top and the sides, can be very, very expensive. So, and often won't work. Just plant more. Just plant an extra apricot or an extra plum, or buy one and give it to your neighbours on both sides or something, or use your nature strip, and perhaps you'll all get enough. Briefly touched on those design considerations for using berries or fruit. I can only give broad tips unless people are giving me specific examples of a situation, and then I can give some recommendations for that. If you have, apart from the staining issue with fruits and whatnot, you also got to be mindful that the large fruits can be a trip hazard. So be careful of sighting them anywhere where the public may encounter the fruits, and certainly be mindful of paths. Shane, comment. Okay. Shane's comment. I rent on a large block and have been using pot plants to fill my green space. Half wine barrels, have a large Banksia serrata. Excellent plant. I'd be interested, Shane, did you buy one of the smaller varieties of Banksia serrata, or is it seed grown or something? Be really interested in that. Here we go. More than like dwarf varieties. I think you've answered my question. 2 large blueberry ash, looking for adding a few large fruit trees in the barrels next. Shane, are you looking at like traditional fruits like the prunuses, like the plums and apricots, and let's put apples and pears in this bunch as well. Blueberry ashes are great. There's so many native trees with bearing fruits that are great. You've mentioned here the Banksia serrata is now over 2 metres tall. Okay, so to me that might be only 1/3 or even 1/4 of how tall it's likely to get. It'll be limited by the size of the of its root ball in a barrel. Tell me, does it look like it's fruiting yet? Because Banksia serrata really takes to judicious, regular pruning to keep it compact, and that can often, depending on the stock that you've got, whether it was a particular variety that fruits early, that flowers early, early in its lifespan, you may get flowers quite quickly. Banksia serrata is a really underutilized plant, I think, these days. If you're not in Australia, you might not be that familiar with Banksias, but Banksias are in the Proteaceae family, which means, they're a, I'm not sure if I'm correct in saying a Gondwana plant. I think there might be a Pangea family. So there's Proteaceae from South Africa, or Southern Africa, Southern South America, Australia, and Grevilleas, Banksias, Hakeas, Persunias, and Dryandras, which are now Banksias, Isopogons. They've all got a long style and a little flower, often in cones or in sort of pendants or toothbrushes. Some are very nectar heavy, fantastic plants for attracting nectar feeding birds, insects. Some of the smaller Grevilleas, particularly, some of the Hakeas, beetles, butterflies, native flies, native bees also love them. So they're really worth considering. But they also, when they finish flowering and they produce their seed, some of them are quite large and woody for the Hakeas and Banksias, and then you get the many of the parrots love them, but the smaller varieties just have little seeds that pigeons, doves, finches, grass parrots, they can also find them really valuable. Not berries, obviously, not fruits, but really, really valuable plants. Okay, Shane, thanks for keeping the comments coming. Shane, I hope you don't mind. I'll let people know from just to place your geography in context. You're in the northeastern suburbs of Melbourne, suburban, in that on the fringes of the city, but you're in a rain belt, I reckon. Tell me if your place is particularly different, but you get much more rain than I do over this side, which means that you can you have the opportunity of planting plants like, I'm not sure a blueberry ash would go so well over here unless I was available to keep the water up to it. We can go with more. I'm far more likely to have success over here with West Australian or South Australian, and perhaps in pots, even desert kind of plants here, as long as I protect them from the frost. Let's have a look. Blueberry ashes are both throwing out hundreds of buds at the moment. Take some photos when they come out. Let us have a look at the flowers before they set fruit. That would be great. Okay, so you'd love to plant native fruit trees, but we'll consider traditional fruiting trees as well. I'll just make a comment there. Oh, Shane, I've got you in the wrong spot. Who did we have on the other day? Oh, it was Chris, wasn't it? Sorry, Shane. I've got you confused with Chris. It was Chris last week, wasn't it? Who was out in Greensborough? Okay, so, well, blueberry ash, obviously a good plant for Thirlmere. Is that the right pronunciation? Out in Picton, near Picton. Does that mean that you were happy that the Penrith Panthers were premiers in the rugby league out there, Shane? Sorry for getting you mixed up. I think it's because you both pop in through Facebook. That also it probably explains why you're doing so well with the Banksia serrata, because they love that part of the country. You're getting cold nights there, I would say, in winter, so you get that nice chilling effect. And are you protected from the dry winds in your spot too, Shane? Let's rap about your place as much as we can today. You're near with Naomi. You're near Naomi, I would assume. I'm just thinking, Shane, with the traditional fruit that you just mentioned, would you be planting them for you for harvesting, or are you thinking about traditional fruit trees for bringing in wildlife? Because I think they're almost divergent unless you already have, neighbours and you're in a fairly built up street. If you have any wild places, for want of a better term, or parks and whatnot, I would encourage you to go for more native things. Okay, so you get the hot winds there. I noticed you didn't mention Penrith in that answer. Let's pop that one up just so people who are watching can check it out. All right. Thanks for clarifying that. So you're looking at plants for wildlife because you're renting at your place, Shane. Are you exclusively growing in containers? And do you have much space? I'm really sorry because I had you confused. I was thinking with Chris, he's on like on some acreage. So I've got to get my head space back into small spaces. Um, are you restricted? Have you got front and back? Uh, just give me a bit of an idea, and maybe I'll well, not maybe. What I will do is I will make a little list as part of the handout uh, for for plants that I consider to be really good for containers, growing in containers. Uh, so yeah, I'll just wait for that to come up as well. Um, yeah, I think we've got a lot to go. I've got a lot to go on with the handout for this week. This week's handout. Um, 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 yeah, I'll just hang about there. The are you planting? The other thing I'll ask you, Shane, is are you planting any grassy, tufty kind of plants? And give us an idea of the birds that visit your garden that you have already got coming in to visit you. And are there any? Is there a target species that you'd like to bring in that you know are are occurring nearby? And we'll pop. We'll have a look at that. So you got 90% are in containers, but you've started planting direct in the ground. Large front and back lawns facing west facing house. Okay. So does that mean your main living area is facing west? That would mean I would assume that your kitchen is either facing uh, east or yeah, so out the back or to the side. Let us know there. Um, okay, all right. Just give us an idea there. Um, Planted about a dozen native grasses on the front yard. Okay, so I'm guessing from that, Shane, if you've been planting native grasses, you're probably putting in poas or thamida or danthonia, so wallaby grass, kangaroo grass, or poas. Perhaps the foxtail fountain grass, pennisedums, Pennisedum alopecuroides, perhaps. Uh, but have you looked at lamandras and dianellas, which will give you lamandras big seeds, and the dianellas those fleshy drupes that I was talking about earlier on. Okay, so kitchen facing east out the back. Okay, so now if your kitchen is anything like mine, you spend a lot of time looking out the kitchen window while you're doing various tasks. So it's nice to have things to look at. I look out to a very shady spot, so we currently have shade-loving plants in pots out my kitchen window. Not very inspiring while doing the dishes, but you might have an opportunity for something a little bit more. Um, I'd love to do a workshop or something on design ideas. I don't know how I can fit that into a live stream. I can probably do well. I can make a video showing that. I'll take that on board. I'm still playing around with the best way to do this, uh, so that you get value out of it. I think I'll be going. Won't be this week. I think next week I'm heading out to out to a nursery with a lot of good container gardens, courtyard ideas. So I'll take some footage and put that into into the live stream somehow. Yes, so Shane, Pennisetum purple fountains. That is indeed Pennisetum alopecuroides, probably one of the selected varieties. Really great plant. Some of the varieties and in some areas can have weed potential. So just check that your local council doesn't have that on the list, because in some places it's a plant that isn't recommended to be growing. Anybody else have any other questions I would like to bring up? Any other comments? Any other suggestions for items or for topics to cover? I'll also let you know that I've invited on some really great authors and some great designers to join me to have a conversation before we go into questions and answers as we come along. Trying to give enough lead time to promote them, the sessions early enough so people have an opportunity to send in questions. But the other thing I'd like to do, and I'm pretty confident in my skill. Not a lot of people will take this on, but I'd be happy for people to send in. It's really got to be done in advance unless you are prepared to come onto the stream and then maybe share a screen or something with us. But I'm happy for you to send me in photos, video clips or something of what you have and what you'd like to achieve. Send me examples of what you think is a really good situation, a really good example of something you would like to achieve at home. While I'm out and about, I just was doing it this week. I often, and for those of you who don't know me well, I got rid of my car in 2014. So I'm either walking around or I'm on public transport, and I'm often seeing amazing sections of someone's garden, which I think they've done really well, or a public space. I'm now documenting these, and I'll bring them into the show when I've got enough of them to make it a little video reel and something that ties in with what I want to talk about in each week. I'd really like to see things that you think are great in your area, or if you're on holidays and you see something amazing. I really regret I took a heap of footage when I was last in Kuala Lumpur, because they have got amazing urban horticulture that gives a lot of opportunities for wildlife in so many places. But of course, I'll show you. I've still got, but I took them all on this little iPhone. Oh no, not this one. Another one. This is the first one that died. But then I upgraded and got another iPhone, and it just completely pooped itself. And I hadn't backed up at that stage. The idea was to back it up when I got back to Australia, but of course it pooped itself, and I didn't get any of the fantastic examples. So I have to go back and catch up with Daryl Jones in Kuala Lumpur and revisit all those amazing places with great opportunities for habitat. Opportunities, for habitat for birds and wildlife there. I'm rambling a bit, aren't I? But that's what I want to bring into the show, and as we grow, hopefully there'll be questions and answers coming in. One of the next things I'm going to do, it won't be next week, maybe the week after. I'm going to show you some really good examples of using water, permanent water in a garden, both large on a large format or large scale in the landscape, medium, and then small. So, Shane, a question again for you. And sorry, I'm looking down. I should be looking at you. I'm just checking some notes. Have you got permanent water in amongst all your plants, Shane? How are you dealing with that? Especially as we come into we're about to get into the hot period. Even though we've had a hot spell here, I know you did up there. Reminds me of something that Heidi Trudell said in the earlier stream about the responsibility we have when we invite wildlife into our places, into our environment. Indeed, it's their environment as well. But if we're inviting them in and we want them to stay, we need to provide what they need and we need to make it safe for them. So water is a really important part of that. Permanent water, so that once animals get used to it, it needs to be there all the time. So how are you handling water at your place, Shane? Well, we're coming up to an hour. I'll just throw open the floor again for some questions if you've got any, or some comments, suggestions of what to cover next. Reminder that you'll be able to find the information about getting the downloads, which today's download will be available on Monday, and hopefully the Swift Parrot plants as well, and that little I've thrown in some bonus tips for that too, for that one, and they will be available. I'll just let you know where the easiest way to promote them. Are you using other socials apart from, Shane, you're on Facebook? We've got Twitch and YouTube with us too. Are people using Instagram because Instagram I can actually link the download. I can put that into a story or a reel. But when it carries over to Facebook, if I post to Facebook, it doesn't come up there as well. So yeah, I think I'll just keep talking about Substack and Patreon. I will also be doing exclusive stuff to the members only formats as we go along in time. Okay, Shane, you have an what you're doing with your water. 3 large bird baths at different heights from the ground to pedestal type. I'd love to create a pond. Okay. Just on that, it's good that pedestal stuff is great. You got something on the ground, okay, and love to create a pond. Have you made a little frog pond in out of a container, or maybe a half barrel or something like that? That's a project I actually want to show how people can do that with all kinds of found objects, recycling and reusing stuff. So Shane, Facebook, YouTube, obviously you're on Facebook now. Instagram, are you following me on Instagram? I'm not sure, because I will be. I'll test out the link in a story on Instagram next week, and we'll see whether that's a way that I can do without sending it to somewhere new. I'm really mindful of. There's so many places to go and everything, but I want to try and consolidate it down to the ones that work. And by work, I mean that people interact and I know that they're finding the content valuable. There's more than enough useless stuff out there. I don't want to add to that. There's more than enough rubbish out there. There, so okay, Shane's thinking of putting in a frog pond. I think Shane, just thinking ahead, we have a public holiday here for the Melbourne Cup. And I'm doing a long stream similar to what I did last year with Nup to the Cup. I'm such a naysayer and doomy person. I can't see the point in horse racing. I can't see the point in why it's so popular for an industry that's just about gambling. So taking the opportunity to have a long stream and invite lots of guests on Tuesday the 7th of November. We'll do a big section on habitat gardening, and I'm going to talk frogs and frog ponds on Nup to the Cup Day. Does that make you happy? I can tell you, I'm not sure what time, but I can tell you that Professor Ewan Ritchie will be joining me on the 7th at some stage, and between now and then I'll have been out taking some lovely footage of what I consider really successful, nice ponds, and some ideas of how you can place water in a pleasing way for our aesthetics, but also really useful for wildlife. And if I'm lucky, I have approached a couple of frog experts to join us. So I'm not sure whether they'll join us live on that day. I guess it depends. Well, it's only Melbourne people who have the holiday for that day. So maybe I'll be lucky. And Shane, I can see you've got a thumbs up with a frog. I like the little emojis, are good, aren't they? So that will be good. So just hang fire for that. That's how many weeks away is that? Well, it's only 3 weeks away anyway. So yes, we will be talking frogs then. A lot of what we talk about with frogs also holds over for some of the lizards and even snakes as well. They love permanent water and vegetation around or in permanent water. Have you got fish in your pond or in your permanent water at all, Shane? Too, I'd love to know about that. Sorry, I just had a very unusual message. People reacting to me posting my referendum voting slip yesterday. Upset a lot of people. It's amazing how people are very upset about my vote. Oh, well. All right, everyone. I think that's about where we'll wrap up for today. There's no point me just talking for the point of talking. We'll just give it a minute or two. If you've got a question or a comment you would like to make, please make it. I hope you are. If you're on your way out to vote and you are going to grab a democracy sausage, well, go into the big establishment with a democracy that provide the barbecues, and have a look around the garden section. Have a look in your plant section. Pick up something. Oh, I love Twitch. Okay. I'll play. Random question. If I could choose anyone to see get tickled as a prank, who would that be? All right, before I answer that, I want to know, Ems, 19,988 on Twitch. Are you coming from the great US of A, or are you coming from Australia or some other location? I'll tailor my answer to your geographic location if I can. Shane, why don't you also think about that that question? Who would you like to see randomly tickled as a prank? I'm guessing they're gonna be. Let's extend it. It's not just tickled, and you're there, and you're the only person who gets to enjoy it. Maybe it's going to be posted on social media, or maybe it's on TV. Okay. Oh, you're from the UK. Okay, you're from the UK. Without question, your immigration minister, without question, would be my UK answer. And perhaps I'd like Russell Brand to do the tickling. You would choose Justin Bieber. I don't think Justin Bieber. I'm agreeing with you that Justin Bieber is quite arrogant. After seeing him lose his cool when someone wanted an autograph when he was getting into a car, I don't think he'd have a funny reaction. I think he'd have a very unfunny reaction, and I think he'd probably get his personal security to manhandle you in a way that nobody would think would be appropriate. Yeah. Justin Bieber. I'd almost forgotten about him. I'm sorry for even bringing him up again. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I don't think he'd be embarrassed. I think he'd just be grumpy. I don't think he'd do one of those cute reactions. I think he'd be asking his personal security detail to be quite unfunny. Anyway, we are totally off topic, but nice distraction from the heavy stuff that's going on around the world. Thanks everyone for being involved. One last opportunity to ask me a habitat gardening question or a bird watching question if you really want. While I'm waiting, I'll just run you through what's coming up next week. Monday marks the start of Bird Week in Australia. Thanks, Ems. If Ems is for Emma, hello, Emma. If not, hello, Ems. Thanks for popping in. We're back every Friday. What is it over there? Is it morning time there yet? Monday with Holly, Dr. Holly Parsons from BirdLife Australia, talking about Bird Week here in Australia, the Aussie Bird Count. If you want to be involved in Aussie Bird Count, go to aussiebirdcount.org.au, download the kit if you haven't done it already, and get involved. Count along with me each morning if you would like. So Holly, midday, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, coming up on Tuesday, 3 p.m, Birdwatching Deep Dive with Ricky again, where we go around some of the rare bird sightings from some more locations around the world. Of course, some of our favourite spots in Australia, and we'll be talking about a birdwatching technique or a birdwatching skill that Ricky thinks you need to master. I have a particular question for Ricky, and on Friday next week, we have Photography Friday. Nick Rashke will be joining me to talk about his gear, his approach to photography, and some of his top 10 shots. And we'll talk about those. And then in a week's time, we'll be back here doing habitat gardening again at 9:30. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Em. That was quite funny. Thanks, Shane. And for anyone else, and sorry again, Shane, for mixing you up with Chris and getting your geography. Only I was pretty close, only about 900 kilometres off kilter. Oh, did you hear that? Oh, I wonder if you did. That's the birds in the mandarin outside my window. Okay, thanks everyone. Be nice to birds. Go and enjoy your garden. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. See you later.